Atlanta, Georgia, 2018. The streets of the city pulsed with a rhythm that never slept. Sirens howled in the distance like restless ghosts, and helicopters blinked overhead like anxious eyes watching from above. At the heart of it all was Officer Tasha Reynolds. At 34, Tasha was everything the Atlanta Police Department admired. Veteran, composed, unshakably disciplined. Her dark brown uniform fit her like armor, pressed, perfect, and always accompanied by the same stoic face that rarely cracked a smile. For nearly a decade, she patrolled the toughest neighborhoods, earned commendations, and kept her private life wrapped tighter than her duty belt. To her fellow officers, Tasha was reliable. To her superiors, she was indispensable. And to herself, she was just surviving. Living alone in a two-bedroom apartment in East Point, Tasha didn't drink, didn't date, didn't entertain friendships. The job was the only thing she trusted. Then came Danielle Brooks. Fresh from academy graduation, Danielle was everything Tasha wasn't. Bubbly, optimistic, and full of questions. 27 years old, bright-eyed, and wearing her badge like it still shimmered with dreams. She had been paired with Tasha for a 6-month field training rotation, and on day one, she showed up with a vanilla latte in one hand and a handwritten notepad in the other. "You must be Officer Reynolds," she'd said, with a wide smile and a southern drawl thick as honey. "Been hearing about you since day one at the academy." Tasha had raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Good or bad?" "Legendary," Danielle had grinned. That first patrol together had been quiet, just a series of false alarms and routine traffic stops. But by the end of the shift, Danielle had filled the air with stories about her hometown, her family, her new husband, and how lucky she felt to be wearing the uniform. Tasha, despite herself, listened. Danielle talked about Malik, her husband of 3 years. "He's in cybersecurity. Smartest man I've ever met. Real calm, you know? Like, when the world spins too fast, he just stands still." It stuck with Tasha, that line. The way Danielle said it. So casual, so adoring. In the weeks that followed, Tasha started to open up in small ways. She corrected Danielle's grip on the Glock. She shared tips on how to write a clean incident report. She even laughed once, just once, when Danielle slipped and dropped her flashlight during a foot chase. People noticed. "Looks like Reynolds finally met someone who cracked her," one officer joked in the locker room. Tasha just shrugged. "She's all right." But the truth was Danielle had crept under her skin. Not in a romantic way, at least not at first. It was the way she asked questions, the way she leaned into the job with heart and fire. Tasha saw in her what she had lost years ago: hope. They began riding together regularly. They were fast, efficient, the envy of every two-person unit in the district. Some called them the A-Team. Others just called them unstoppable. And Tasha, for the first time in a long time, felt something unfamiliar: connection. But connection, as she would soon learn, could be dangerous, especially when it came wrapped in a warm smile, a trusting heart, and a husband with eyes that saw too much. It started with a simple invitation. "Hey, you should come over for dinner this weekend," Danielle said one evening as they were wrapping up paperwork in the squad room. "Malik makes a mean shrimp and grits, and he's been dying to meet you. Says I talk about my partner like you're my girlfriend or something." Tasha laughed, a real one this time. It surprised even her. She hesitated. She wasn't the dinner at someone's house type. But Danielle had that way of looking at you, like saying no would personally offend her entire family lineage. "All right," Tasha said. "Saturday, okay?" Danielle beamed. "Saturday it is." The Brooks home sat on a quiet tree-lined street in Decatur, a world away from the noise and grit of the city. The house was modest but charming, brick facade, porch swing, candles flickering in the window. Tasha rang the bell at exactly 6 p.m., her shirt crisp, her shoulders squared like she was walking into a crime scene. The door opened to laughter and warmth. Danielle wore a yellow sundress and bare feet. She hugged Tasha like they hadn't seen each other in months. "You're early. Come in, come in. Shoes off, house rule." Tasha stepped inside, where jazz music drifted through the air and something savory simmered in the kitchen. Then Malik appeared. Tall, smooth-skinned, deep brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His posture was relaxed but confident. There was something calming about him, like standing next to a still lake before sunrise. "You must be the famous Officer Reynolds," he said, offering his hand. "Danielle makes you sound like Batman." Tasha shook his hand, noting the warmth in his grip. "Let's hope not. Batman's kind of mess." Malik laughed. "Fair enough. Drink." They moved into the living room. Malik poured wine. Danielle set the table. It felt domestic, like something out of a life Tasha had never lived. She sat on the couch, her eyes trailing the photos on the wall. Wedding pictures, beach trips, college graduations. "Where'd you two meet?" she asked. "Freshman year at Morehouse in Spelman," Malik answered from the kitchen. She wouldn't give me the time of day at first. Danielle laughed. "He was too smooth. I didn't trust him. But I wore her down," Malik said, placing a steaming bowl in front of Tasha. Eventually, Tasha smiled politely but felt a sharp twist in her gut. Dinner was perfect. The food, the laughter, the casual way Danielle touched Malik's arm, and the way Malik, every time he spoke, looked at Tasha just a second longer than he should have. It wasn't overt, just enough to make her notice. Later, as Danielle cleaned up in the kitchen, Tasha and Malik found themselves alone on the porch. A soft Georgia breeze moved through the trees. Crickets hummed somewhere in the distance. "So," Malik said, sipping from his glass, "how's she doing out there?" "My wife. She ever freeze up? Get scared." Tasha leaned back. "She's solid. Quick on her feet. Smarter than most rookies I've worked with." He nodded. "I worry, you know. She doesn't always say it, but I can see it on her. The job's wearing her down." There was a beat of silence. Then Malik added, more quietly, "She forgets herself sometimes. Like the version of her that's mine gets swallowed up by the badge." Tasha looked at him, studying the lines in his face. The vulnerability there surprised her. "I guess we all lose a little of ourselves in this job," she said. Their eyes met. Held. It lasted only a moment, but the air thickened with something unspoken. Tasha looked away first. Inside, Danielle called out, "You two better not be talking about me." Malik smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. But Tasha knew what had just happened wasn't nothing. It was a shift, a crack in the ground beneath her feet. And cracks, they grow. That night, back at her apartment, Tasha lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The laughter from the Brooks home still echoed in her ears. But what haunted her most wasn't Danielle's joy. It was Malik's quiet eyes. His voice when he said, "She forgets herself." It felt like an invitation, not into their home, but into something far more dangerous. Tasha closed her eyes and whispered into the dark, "She doesn't deserve him." And with that single thought, the seed was planted. A seed that would grow into something lethal. Tasha tried to shake it. She really did. 4 days after that dinner at the Brooks house, she threw herself into work with double the focus, extra shifts, night patrols, even volunteering for desk duty on her usual day off. But nothing helped. Malik's voice lingered in her mind like the bass line of a song she couldn't stop humming. His eyes, too perceptive, too steady, flashed through her memory whenever her mind wandered. And it wandered often. Danielle didn't notice at first. She was too busy being Danielle, always smiling, always humming when she walked into the precinct, always showing Tasha a new smoothie recipe or photos from the weekend hiking trip with Malik. And each one made Tasha flinch. What started as subtle resentment began to swell. Tasha caught herself comparing, Danielle's laugh, Danielle's hair, Danielle's casual confidence. She started seeing Danielle not as a friend or a partner, but as an obstacle, a barrier between her and something she suddenly believed she deserved. Happiness. Peace. Him. It didn't help that Malik began texting her. At first, it was innocent. Malik, 8:47 p.m. Hey, thanks again for coming over last weekend. Danielle was so happy. Tasha, 8:49 p.m. Of course. You two make a good team. Then, it turned flirtatious. Malik, 11:12 p.m. I think you might be the only person who really gets what she goes through out there. She never talks to me about it the way she talks to you. Tasha stared at that message for a long time. She didn't reply, but she didn't delete it either. Their patrol shifts continued like clockwork, but the rhythm had changed. Tasha grew distant, no longer warm, no longer cracking quiet jokes on long drives between calls. Danielle noticed. You all right? She asked one afternoon as they sat in the cruiser eating drive-thru tacos. You've been off lately. I'm fine, Tasha said, not looking up from her sandwich. You sure? Danielle pushed. If I did something... You didn't, Tasha snapped. Just drop it. Danielle blinked. Stung. Then she nodded slowly and went quiet. Tasha regretted at the moment the words left her mouth. But she said nothing. She couldn't. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was a rainy Tuesday night. The city was quiet. Too quiet. They were parked behind an abandoned strip mall, finishing up a domestic disturbance report when Danielle got a call. Tasha sat in the driver's seat, half listening, half scrolling through her phone when she heard Danielle say, Yeah, babe. I'll be late tonight. We caught another call. Pause. Laughter. No, you go ahead and eat without me. I love you. Tasha froze. Danielle ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Tasha didn't speak. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Danielle glanced over. What? Tasha's voice was low, controlled, dangerous. Must be nice to have someone waiting at home. Danielle gave a soft smile. It is, but I don't take it for granted, if that's what you're thinking. Tasha's jaw clenched. You should. Danielle tilted her head. What's going on with you, Tash? For real. I said I'm fine, but she wasn't. That night, Tasha went home and began something she hadn't done in years, planning. Not a case, not a report, a scenario. She opened her laptop, pulled up street maps, ballistics data, patrol logs. She looked through Danielle's social media, traced her running routes, her gym schedule, even when she skipped wearing her vest. Tasha didn't just memorize Danielle's habits. She studied her like prey. She told herself it wasn't real. Just a thought exercise. Just a way to get it out of her system. But the more she mapped it out, the calmer she felt. The more she imagined a world without Danielle, the more she believed it could be a better world for Malik. For her. A week later, a call came through dispatch. Armed robbery in progress at a small convenience store in an outer suburb. Tasha and Danielle were the closest unit. Tasha's heart pounded as they flipped on the sirens. She knew this was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment she could finally silence the static in her mind. The moment to erase the obstacle that wore a badge and a wedding ring and a smile that didn't belong to her. In the darkness, as they raced down I-285, Danielle reached for the radio. Tasha stared straight ahead, the rain streaking down the windshield like falling glass. She whispered to herself, barely audible, no more waiting. Tasha didn't sleep that night. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling fan's spinning shadows across the wall, her thoughts chasing themselves in endless circles. For the first time in years, she let herself remember the thing she had buried the deepest. Marcus. He'd been her last real relationship. Another cop. Another uniform. He was charming at first, called her steel-wrapped velvet, said she had the rare kind of soul that was both unbreakable and soft. And then he cheated. Not once, not twice, but for months with a fellow officer in their unit. When Tasha found out, it wasn't the betrayal that broke her. It was the fact that no one told her. Everyone had known. Everyone had let her walk into roll call, week after week, smiling like a fool beside a man who never deserved her. That was the moment she swore off feelings, swore off trust. The badge was simple. It didn't lie. It didn't sleep around. It didn't touch your face in the morning and then lie to you at night. But now Malik was in her head. His quiet voice, his gentle laugh, his eyes that looked straight through her walls like they weren't even there. He made her feel visible again, human. And Danielle? She didn't even see what she had. Tasha whispered to the dark again, but this time the words were sharper, bitter. She never saw you the way I do. That night, the planning didn't start with hate. It started with heartbreak. March 3rd, 2020. The sun had just dipped below the tree line when the call came in, robbery in progress, armed suspect on scene, multiple 911 calls coming from Carter's Corner Market in Glenridge. Tasha didn't blink. She had been waiting for this moment like a wolf stalks its prey in snow, cold, calculating, patient. She'd memorized every scenario, rehearsed every step, the timing, the lighting, even the trajectory of the bullet. Everything had to be perfect. Danielle was in the passenger's seat, adjusting her vest while talking through approach protocol. We park around back. I'll take the south wall. You take north. We sweep and clear together. Tasha gave a single nod. Copy that. They pulled up 2 minutes later. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet for a scene like this. No witnesses lingering. No sounds of gunfire. Just a flicker of faulty neon lights from the corner store and the rustle of wind through trash-littered trees. Tasha killed the engine. Both officers stepped out, guns drawn, eyes sharp. Unit 218 on scene. Danielle spoke in her shoulder mic, approaching from rear entrance. Tasha said nothing. Her pulse was calm. Her hand was steady. They made their way down the narrow alleyway toward the back of the store. It was dark, but the overhead security light buzzed to life, casting a dull yellow glow. Danielle led the way, steps confident, focused. Then came the sound, a crash inside, a shelf tipping over, the rattle of metal. Danielle turned her head, eyes alert. You hear that? Tasha didn't answer. Instead, she drew in a breath, measured, intentional, and pulled the trigger. Crack. The bullet pierced Danielle's vest, low, near the spine, exactly where Tasha had predicted. She never fastened it tight. Danielle let out a strangled gasp and crumpled instantly. Her body folded awkwardly, hitting the concrete with a sickening thud. Tasha didn't stop. She pivoted smoothly, took aim at the rear glass door of the market, and fired again. 2 quick rounds into the store to stage the scene. One of the bullets shattered a bottle inside. The other embedded into a cereal display. She then ran to Danielle's side, fell to her knees, and activated her mic with a voice already trembling. Officer down. Shots fired. I repeat, officer down. Suspect may still be inside. She pressed her hand to Danielle's back. Blood pooled fast. Danielle's eyes were wide, confused, blinking rapidly. She tried to speak, lips forming syllables with no sound. Her fingers reached weakly toward Tasha's arm. Tasha gripped her hand. It's okay. I got you. You're gonna be all right, she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to sound real. But inside, there was nothing. No remorse. No panic. Just silence. 3 nights before the shooting, Danielle sat on her couch at home, flipping through her patrol notes, trying to shake a gnawing feeling she couldn't name. Something was off with Tasha. She noticed it in her eyes, how they lingered too long on Malik, how her voice turned sharp over nothing, how she stopped laughing at her jokes. The warmth had gone, replaced by something colder, more calculated. Danielle opened her phone and recorded a voice memo to herself. Something she started doing when cases got heavy. Private thoughts, locked away behind facial ID. The memo was only 40 seconds long. I don't know what's going on with her. Maybe it's just stress. But something's changed. She looks at me like I'm not even me anymore. I keep thinking about telling Malik or maybe going to the sergeant, but I don't want to be paranoid. Maybe she just needs space. She paused. I still trust her. I think, God, I hope I'm not wrong. She saved it, titled it Tasha March, and never played it again. After her death, the phone was locked. The message buried. Investigators found it weeks later during a digital sweep of her device, but by then, it was just another ghost in the machine. The warning had been there, but the bullet came first. Backup arrived within 4 minutes. Sirens split the night as patrol units and medics stormed the scene. Officers fanned out, searching for a suspect that didn't exist. Inside the store, the clerk, terrified and disoriented, insisted he hadn't seen anyone with a weapon. Danielle was pronounced dead at the scene. And Tasha? She was a hero. The next morning, the Atlanta Police Department held a press conference. A tragic loss in the line of duty, the chief announced, voice heavy with sorrow. Officer Danielle Brooks, 27 years old, killed while responding to a robbery in progress. She served with honor. She died in service. Tasha stood behind him, stoic, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. A black band was wrapped tightly around her badge. Everyone praised her composure, her bravery, how she stayed with Danielle until the end. Even Malik. He came to the precinct 3 days later to pick up Danielle's personal effects. Tasha met him in the lobby, her uniform still creased from the memorial. I'm so sorry, she said, softly, barely above a whisper. Malik nodded, hollow-eyed. They told me you were with her when it happened. I didn't leave her side. Malik exhaled hard, like the grief had been lodged in his chest and now had nowhere to go. You were the last person she trusted, he said. She talked about you like family. Tasha looked away, swallowing the acid in her throat. She was the best partner I ever had. And somehow, that wasn't a lie. In the weeks that followed, Malik leaned on Tasha more and more. Grief blurred boundaries. He'd text her late at night, sometimes just one word, hurting, and she'd reply, I know. They met for coffee, for walks, for long silences that didn't need to be filled. He cried once, shoulders shaking in a park bench at Grant Park, Tasha's hand resting gently on his back. I keep wondering what she saw in me, he said, voice cracking. She saw someone strong, Tasha said, someone worth fighting for. And this time, she didn't look away when their eyes met. But while Tasha's world settled into the story she had written, others began reading between the lines. Danielle's autopsy raised questions. The angle of the bullet, the trajectory, the lack of any traceable suspect. The surveillance footage from outside the store that showed no one entering or exiting at the supposed time of the incident. Lieutenant Carol Simmons, Internal Affairs, quietly reopened the investigation. And Tasha? She didn't know it yet, but the gun in her holster was no longer her greatest threat. The truth was, the flowers were still fresh on Danielle's grave when the doubts began to bloom. Lieutenant Carol Simmons had been with Internal Affairs for over 20 years. She had seen every kind of cover-up, every version of grief used as a shield. She didn't rush to conclusions, but she trusted her gut. And from the moment she read the first draft of the incident report, something didn't sit right. The story didn't add up. A veteran like Tasha Reynolds missing a suspect entirely? A fatal shot to her partner's exposed lower back, even though protocol demanded body armor? No clear suspect on the scene. No witnesses. And surveillance footage that captured just one person entering the rear alley, Danielle. Not the shooter. Just Danielle. Simmons didn't announce her suspicions. She kept her tone calm, her actions methodical. Quietly, she requested the full crime scene file. She visited Carter's Corner Market herself, walking the alleyway, mapping the angles, imagining the chaos described in the report. Only, there had been no chaos. There had been silence. And then 2 shots. One that hit Danielle in the back. One that hit a cereal shelf. No shell casings from the so-called suspect. No security footage of a masked man fleeing. Not even a clear description from the panic store clerk, who swore up and down he never saw a gun. But what Simmons saw, what stood out like neon on a foggy night. Tasha's calm. Too calm. Meanwhile, Tasha was slipping into her role as grieving survivor with disturbing ease. She made appearances at the precinct with Malik at her side, accepting condolences with practiced restraint. Her voice soft, her eyes hollow. The perfect image of someone who had lost a partner, a friend. She even spoke at Danielle's memorial. I was supposed to protect her, she said, standing at the podium in a crisp dress uniform. And I failed. Tears glistened in her eyes. The crowd sniffled. One officer dropped his head and wept. Malik held her hand the entire time. Afterward, Simmons approached her with a respectful nod. Hell of a speech, she said. You holding up okay? Tasha nodded, avoiding direct eye contact. Some days are harder than others. I bet, Simmons said. Mind if I ask a few follow-up questions? Just try and tie off loose ends. Sure, Tasha replied smoothly. Whatever you need. The first interview was short. Routine. Simmons asked about weapon position, lighting conditions, angles. Tasha stuck to her original statement almost word for word. Too perfectly. Simmons jotted a note in her notebook. Scripted. 2 days later, she returned with more questions. Walk me through the exact moment the shots were fired, she said, voice casual. Tasha leaned forward. I heard a crash. Danielle moved toward the noise. I turned left to cover her flank. Then, gunshots. It happened so fast. I didn't even see the shooter. But you fired twice, Simmons said. Correct. Yes. Reflex. Training kicked in. You didn't see the shooter, but you fired in his direction? Tasha hesitated. A beat too long. I saw movement. I thought. But the camera outside didn't show anyone leaving the building afterward. Tasha tensed. Maybe the double back. Or hid. Simmons didn't argue. She just closed her notebook and smiled politely. I'll be in touch. That same evening, Simmons met with the crime scene tech. I want ballistics redone, she said. I want trajectory analysis down to the centimeter. The tech raised an eyebrow. You think Reynolds? I'm not thinking anything yet, but I'm listening to the evidence. And it's talking. 2 days later, the report came in. Trajectory of the fatal shot indicates an angle inconsistent with any possible position of an outside assailant. Entry wound suggests shooter stood directly behind victim, within 6 to 8 feet. Simmons stared at the page. Her stomach sank. Tasha didn't miss. She never had. That weekend, Malik invited Tasha over for dinner. It was a quiet affair, roasted chicken, red wine, jazz humming through the Bluetooth speaker. They talked about grief, about healing. And for the first time, they talked about the future. I keep wondering what Danielle would want me to do next, Malik said, staring into his glass. Some nights, I can almost hear her say live. Tasha reached across the table. Her fingers touched his. I think you already know the answer. Their hands stayed there a second longer than they should have. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Tasha excused herself and stepped outside to take it. Reynolds, she answered, cool and flat. It's Simmons. I need you to come in Monday. We've got some inconsistencies I want to clear up. Tasha's grip on the phone tightened. Can't it wait? No, Simmons said. It can't. Monday arrived like a storm. Tasha walked into the precinct with her badge clipped, gun holstered, and spine straight. But for the first time in her career, She felt the floor under her shift. Simmons met her in the interrogation room. Not an office, not a conference table. A deliberate message. "Why here?" Tasha asked. "We just want to be thorough," Simmons replied. Over the next 2 hours, Simmons walked through every detail. Every inch of the crime scene. Every bullet path. Every second of that surveillance video. "Let me ask you something," Simmons said, finally leaning back. "Why did you fire 2 rounds?" "Because I was trained to eliminate a threat. But there's no evidence a threat existed. I saw movement." "No, you didn't," Simmons said flatly. "You didn't see anyone because no one else was there." Tasha didn't answer. Simmons slid a photograph across the table. It was Danielle, sprawled on the concrete, blood pooled beneath her. "Do you want to tell me what really happened out there, Officer Reynolds?" Tasha stared at the photo. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. But in that silence, something cracked. And Simmons knew. By the time Officer Tasha Reynolds was officially arrested, the city of Atlanta was already rumbling. The charges came fast. Murder in the first degree. Abuse of authority. Filing a false police report. The moment the cuffs clicked around her wrists, the press exploded. News vans crowded the front of APD headquarters. Her mugshot was splashed across TV screens with headlines that screamed, "Beloved officer accused of killing her own partner." Blue betrayal. Cop murdered her best friend. Inside the courtroom, it wasn't any quieter. From the gallery, it looked like a betrayal on trial. Not just of a woman killing her partner, but of the uniform itself. The prosecutors came prepared. They presented their case with surgical precision. Exhibit A, the ballistic report, showing that the fatal shot had come from behind and below, a position Tasha would have occupied, not any suspect. Exhibit B, surveillance footage, revealing that no one but Danielle had entered the alley before the shooting. No suspect, no threat, only the two of them. Exhibit C, witness testimony from the store clerk, who confirmed there was no one with a weapon, just gunshots and silence. And then came the motive, a string of text messages between Tasha and Malik. Friendly at first, then personal, then flirtatious. One message in particular from Tasha read aloud in court. "Some people don't deserve what they have. You ever wonder what life would feel like if it was just you and me?" The courtroom fell quiet after that. Even the jury shifted in their seats. Malik Brooks was called to the stand on the third day. He looked like a shell of the man who had once stood on his porch with a glass of wine and an easy smile. Now, in a simple gray suit, he seemed older, thinner, as if grief had taken up permanent residence inside his chest. The prosecutor asked gently, "Mr. Brooks, can you describe your relationship with Officer Reynolds after your wife's death?" Malik nodded slowly. "We leaned on each other. I was lost. She was the last piece of Danielle I had left." "Did you ever suspect she was involved in your wife's death?" Malik's voice cracked. "No, I trusted her. I trusted both of them." There was a long pause. Then he added, almost to himself, "I didn't know I was sleeping next to the person who killed my wife." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Tasha sat motionless at the defense table, jaw tight, eyes forward. She didn't look at Malik. She couldn't. The defense tried everything. They painted Tasha as a decorated officer, a loyal servant of the law who had been caught in a chaotic, tragic moment. They called character witnesses, old partners, academy instructors, even a former precinct captain who said, "She's the most disciplined officer I've ever known." But when pressed about Danielle, no one could deny the tension in the weeks before her death. One officer admitted they'd been off. Something had changed. I couldn't say what, but it was there. The final blow came when Lieutenant Carol Simmons took the stand. She laid it all out, calm, professional, deadly. Officer Reynolds used her knowledge of police procedures to stage the perfect crime, Simmons testified. She understood the blind spots. She used her position, and she used her partner's trust against her. The prosecution rested, and the defense had nowhere to go. On May 12, 2021, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty. Murder in the first degree. Life without the possibility of parole. The judge read the sentence aloud as Tasha stood, still in her tailored suit, eyes blank. You showed no remorse, Officer Reynolds. No hesitation. This was premeditated. Cold. Calculated. You were sworn to protect, and instead, you killed. The gavel struck. And just like that, it was over. But for the Atlanta Police Department, it was far from over. The case of Officer Reynolds didn't just end with a gavel. It cracked something deep inside the department, something that no internal review or press statement could repair. Veterans who had trained with Tasha sat in break rooms staring at the floor. Younger officers asked quietly, if someone like her could snap, what about the rest of us? The badge had always symbolized brotherhood, loyalty, trust. But now, there were side glances between partners, quiet hesitations. Patrol units shuffled. Supervisors doubled down on psychological evaluations and ethics workshops. The unspoken truth spread like smoke. She knew the system too well. That's how she used it. Captain DeMarco, who had once nominated Tasha for Officer of the Year, offered a single statement to the press. She fooled us all, and will carry that shame for the rest of our careers. Danielle's name was posthumously honored, but even the ceremony felt fractured. Some officers couldn't bring themselves to attend. Others stood in silent protest, struggling with the idea that they had once laughed with, worked beside, even defended a woman capable of such betrayal. Lieutenant Carol Simmons declined all interviews. But in a leaked internal memo, her words were stark. This wasn't just a failure of one officer. It was a failure of the culture that didn't see her coming. From that point on, rookie training included a new case study, the Reynolds file. And the message was simple. The real danger isn't always the one pointing the gun. Sometimes, it's the one you call your partner. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Malik, but he said nothing. Later, when asked in a private interview what he would say to Tasha if he ever saw her again, he replied, "She didn't just take Danielle. She took away the version of me that could ever trust love again." But there was one detail that never made it into the court record. 2 days before Tasha's arrest, Malik deleted every message she had ever sent him. Not just from his phone, from the cloud. Forensic techs later flagged the activity, an encrypted purge done with software beyond what most civilians could use. But Malik had worked in cybersecurity for a decade. When questioned, he claimed it was grief, that he couldn't bear to see her words anymore. No one pressed further. But Lieutenant Simmons, she made a note of it in her private files. Unprovable, but not uninteresting. And then there was the voicemail, left by Tasha the night before her arrest. The system logged it, but Malik never played it. Not even once. He deleted it without listening. Why? No one knows. Perhaps he didn't need to hear what he already knew. Or maybe he couldn't bear to know how far he'd let her fall. Either way, the silence spoke louder than any recording. And in a case full of echoes. This was the loudest one of all. In her prison cell at Pulaski State Prison, Tasha stares out the small window at the gray yard beyond. Every night, she dreams of that alley, of Danielle's eyes wide with confusion, of the silence that followed the gunshot. She tells herself it was meant to be. She tells herself Malik loved her. But the only voice she hears anymore is Danielle's, and it's asking why. 2 years later, Atlanta still remembers. Danielle Brooks' name is etched in black marble at the officers' memorial downtown, just beneath the seal of the APD, next to the words "End of Watch, March 3rd, 2020. Every May, fresh flowers are laid beneath her name. Her family comes. So do former colleagues. And so does Malik Brooks, quietly, wearing the same gray suit he wore to her trial. He never remarried. He never returned to the house in Decatur. After the sentencing, Malik left Atlanta and settled in Asheville, North Carolina. A smaller place, quieter. He took a remote contract in cybersecurity and now works mostly from home. Neighbors say he keeps to himself. Some think he's shy. Others just sense the weight he carries. Inside his modest apartment, there's a single photo on the bookshelf. Danielle, in uniform, grinning as she holds up a Rookie of the Year plaque. Her eyes are full of fire. Her future, back then, seemed limitless. He talks to the photo sometimes, not out loud, but in his head. He tells her how the days are, what the weather's like, that he tried cooking her favorite lasagna recipe and burned it again. He never talks about Tasha. There are names you bury deeper than the dead. At Pulaski State Prison, Tasha Reynolds has become a ghost behind bars. She doesn't cause trouble, doesn't talk much. She walks the yard alone, keeps her head down. Inmates whisper about her. That's the cop who killed her partner. Tasha no longer corrects them. She spends her time in the prison library, reading old crime novels and dog-eared textbooks. Once in a while, she writes in a journal. No one knows what she's writing. No one really asks. She receives no visitors. Not from family. Not from friends. And definitely not from Malik. She stopped hoping for that after the first year. But what no one knew, what no one asked, was that she wrote. In a plain black notebook, tucked beneath her prison cot, Tasha Reynolds filled pages in ink so fine it looked like confession whispered through a keyhole. Some nights, the guard saw her scribbling until lights out. Never crying, never muttering, just writing. It wasn't until a routine cell inspection during her second year that the journal was found. Pages filled with chaos, calculation, sorrow, and one entry dated March 3rd, 2021, exactly 1 year after Danielle's murder, stood out. I didn't pull the trigger because I hated her. I pulled it because she was in the way. Because I believed if she disappeared, everything else would fall into place. The peace, the love, the man. But it never came. He mourned her louder than he ever looked at me. I became the void. Sometimes I wonder if I pulled the trigger on Danielle or on myself. Either way, I'm gone. Only my body remains. The journal was never made public. Simmons reviewed it. Malik refused to read it. And the prison warden locked it away in the evidence archive. But those words, once written, lived forever. Proof that sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the ones who lose control. They're the ones who control everything, until they can't anymore. Sometimes, late at night, she closes her eyes and tries to remember what it felt like before. Before the obsession, before the lie, before the sound of her own gun firing into someone she once called her sister. But memory is a cruel thing. It doesn't play favorites. It just replays, over and over. The case of Danielle Brooks and Tasha Reynolds became a textbook example in APD's ethics training, an uncomfortable reminder that danger doesn't always come from outside the badge. Sometimes it rides in the seat right next to you. In the end, 3 lives were destroyed, one by a bullet, one by betrayal, and one by the heavy silence that always follows the sound of justice. They say the badge is sacred, a symbol of trust, of sacrifice, of honor. But sometimes it hides a different kind of story, a darker one where the line between protector and predator disappears, and love turns to obsession, loyalty turns to betrayal, and justice becomes a question mark. Tasha Reynolds wore her badge with pride. She earned respect, rose through the ranks, and carried herself like a pillar of discipline. No one expected her fall. No one saw it coming, until the shot rang out behind Carter's Corner Market and shattered everything. Danielle Brooks was the rookie who had it all. Heart, hustle, a future, and someone she trusted standing right behind her with a gun. In the months that followed, Atlanta was left asking, how do we miss the signs? How does someone go from partner to killer? But maybe the real question is the one that haunts everyone left behind. What do you do when the person who should have saved you pulls the trigger instead? The answer? You grieve. You rebuild. You never forget. Because some betrayals don't echo with sound. They echo with silence. The silence of a cruiser with only one officer in it. The silence of a radio that never answers back. The silence of a man staring at a photo of the woman he loved and the woman who killed her. And that silence? It never leaves.